The courtroom buzzed quietly with murmurs and shuffling papers as people settled into their seats. Journalists held their cameras ready. Police officers stood alert, and lawyers whispered final notes to themselves. At the center of this tension sat a tiny girl, just 3 years old, gripping a worn stuffed rabbit in one hand and holding tightly onto the leash of a large, calm police dog with the other. Lily Anderson's small frame seemed swallowed by the wooden chair she perched on, her wide eyes flickering nervously between the judge's bench and the defendant seated across the room. It was the first time Lily had been in a courtroom since the case began, and everyone present knew she was the youngest witness to ever appear in this old city's legal system. The judge had allowed special accommodations for her, a smaller chair, frequent breaks, and most importantly, her companion Max, a retired police dog trained to comfort children in traumatic situations. Max sat quietly beside her, his intelligent eyes watching over Lily with gentle vigilance. The big dog was more than just a pet. He was her protector, her silent anchor in a world that suddenly felt dangerous and unfamiliar. For months, Lily had barely spoken, trapped in a frightened silence after what had happened at her foster home. But today, everyone hoped something might change. The defendant, Carl Brenner, looked calm on the surface, but a flicker of unease betrayed him whenever his gaze met Lily's. Brenner was accused of abusing several foster children under his care, a man who had passed all background checks and charmed social workers with his clean record and friendly demeanor. But bruises, whispered cries, and strange disappearances had begun unraveling the carefully constructed facade. Lily was the key. The prosecution had built their case on physical evidence, medical reports, and expert testimony. But without a direct witness, they feared doubt. And so, with great care, they had brought Lily here to testify. The room was silent now as the prosecutor approached Lily, kneeling to her eye level. His voice was soft but steady. "Lily, do you know why we're here today?" She blinked, then nodded slightly, clutching Max's leash tighter. "We want to know what happened at your house, so we can help you feel safe." The girl's lip trembled, and she looked down at her rabbit. For a moment, no words came. Then, unexpectedly, she lifted her head and glanced around the courtroom, her gaze lingering on a tall figure in a suit. Though her voice was barely above a whisper, the weight of what she would say next promised to change everything. Outside the courtroom, a handful of people waited anxiously. Lily's foster care social worker, the therapist who had helped her begin to speak again, and a small group of reporters who had been following the case since the first reports of abuse surfaced months ago. Inside, the judge, a stern woman with years of experience, adjusted her glasses and watched closely. The courtroom wasn't just a room for legal proceedings today. It was a stage for a tiny voice that might tip the scales of justice. Lily's eyes moved slowly from one person to another, lingering on the defendant. She gripped Max's leash so tightly her small fingers paled. Max, sensing the girl's anxiety, shifted closer to her side, resting his large head gently on her lap. His presence seemed to soothe her just a little, the tension in her small body easing. "Can you tell us what happened at your house?" the prosecutor gently asked again. A pause stretched, then Lily's little finger pointed tremblingly toward the man accused of harming her. 2 small words escaped her lips, soft, barely audible, yet powerful enough to silence the entire room. "That one." The simple phrase echoed with a weight far beyond its size, carrying the full force of a child's courage and truth. In that instant, the courtroom held its breath. Max's ears perked up, and he quietly growled, a low sound of warning that sent a ripple through the room. Carl Brenner's face tightened, eyes narrowing. Everyone knew this was just the beginning. But for Lily, and for justice, it was a moment that could never be forgotten. The small town of Maplewood had always been the kind of place where everyone knew each other's name. The kind of town where neighbors waved from porch swings and children played freely in the streets until dusk. But the news that had swept through the community in recent months shattered that comforting image. Rumors of abuse in a foster home, a place meant to be safe, sent shockwaves through the town, leaving parents worried and children frightened. Carl Brenner had been a trusted figure in Maplewood for years, a quiet man who kept to himself. He volunteered at local events and had fostered several children over time. Many in the town's social services praised him as model foster care, a man who had passed every background check, every inspection, and had an impeccable reputation. But behind closed doors, something dark festered. It began with a few whispered reports from school teachers noticing bruises on children's arms and legs. A concerned neighbor called Child Protective Services after hearing late-night screams. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Several foster children had been moved out suddenly, and no one was quite sure why. The police investigation uncovered enough to bring Brenner in for questioning. Yet without a direct witness or confession, the case teetered on fragile ground. The physical evidence told part of the story. Bruises documented by doctors, medical reports citing trauma, and missing items suggesting neglect. Still, prosecutors feared the case might collapse without a voice to speak the truth. That voice belonged to Lily. After months of silence, Lily had begun to speak in therapy, offering small, halting words about her experiences. Her descriptions were painful and fragmented, but her courage was undeniable. The prosecution decided that, with careful preparation and the support of her therapy dog Max, bringing her into the courtroom was the only way to secure justice. Inside the courtroom, the air remained thick with tension. Outside, the town held its breath, watching a story unfold that none of them could ignore. For Lily's foster care social worker, Marie Donovan, the case had become deeply personal. She had visited Lily countless times in the hospital and at the children's shelter, watching the little girl retreat deeper into silence with each new day. Marie had fought tirelessly to make sure Lily's voice would be heard, knowing the power it could hold. The truth is hard for any child, especially one so young, Marie later said in an interview. But Lily's bravery has opened a door not just for her, but for all the kids who suffer in silence. Lily's therapist, Dr. Helen Marks, was one of the few adults who had seen her gradually emerge from trauma's shadow. Through months of patient work, Dr. Marks had helped Lily rebuild trust, not just in adults but in herself. Children like Lily carry heavy burdens, Dr. Marks explained. They may not understand all the details, but they know when something is wrong. Helping them find their voice is the first step toward healing. Back in the courtroom, the defense team worked to dismantle the prosecution's case, arguing that the bruises could have come from normal childhood accidents, and questioning whether Lily's testimony could be trusted given her age and trauma. They painted Brenner as a victim of false accusations. But the prosecution was prepared. They called medical experts to detail the nature of Lily's injuries, specialists who testified that the pattern and severity could not be accidental. They also introduced foster care workers who described Brenner's sudden evasiveness and the unexplained disappearances of children from his home. Still, the turning point was expected to come with Lily's testimony. Everyone waited to see if the smallest witness could provide the clarity the case desperately needed. And when Lily finally spoke, pointing directly at Brenner and saying that one, the courtroom knew the tide was turning. Max, the police dog, remained by Lily's side, alert and protective. His presence was more than symbolic. It was a vital source of comfort for the frightened girl, grounding her in a world that felt overwhelming. For the town of Maplewood, the trial was no longer just a legal proceeding. It was a reckoning, a test of their collective responsibility to protect their most vulnerable. As the case unfolded, more families came forward with their own stories of abuse and neglect, inspired by Lily's courage. The community began to rally around efforts to reform foster care, demanding stronger oversight and better protections. Though the courtroom was a place of cold facts and formal procedures, outside it became a beacon of hope. Lily's story was about more than just one little girl. It was about the power of truth, the strength found in unexpected places, and the courage it takes to stand up, even when the world is watching. Max was no ordinary dog. A retired police canine with years of service behind him, he had once been the town's pride, trained to track suspects, search for missing persons, and protect his handler at all costs. But after a long career filled with adrenaline and danger, Max had transitioned to a new, gentler role, a therapy dog for children who had experienced trauma. When Lily first met Max, she was too afraid to speak. The world around her was a blur of frightening noises and unfamiliar faces, and trust was a language she no longer understood. But Max's calm presence was a lifeline. The dog seemed to know exactly when to sit close, when to rest his head on her lap, and when to gently nudge her hand with his cold nose. Over time, Max became more than a companion. He became Lily's protector and her friend. He offered her safety in a way no adult could, his steady heartbeat a comforting rhythm that reminded her she was not alone. Max's training was extensive. Beyond basic obedience, he had been taught to recognize signs of distress in children, sudden changes in breathing, trembling hands, averted gaze, and respond accordingly. His handler, Officer Daniels, had worked with him for years, and together they understood the silent language between dog and child. As the day of the trial approached, Max's role took on new significance. The courtroom was an intimidating place for anyone, let alone a frightened toddler. But with Max by her side, Lily found moments of calm amid the overwhelming crowd. Officer Daniels watched closely as Lily clung to Max's leash, whispering softly to him when she felt scared. The dog's gentle eyes never left her, and whenever the accused glared in their direction, Max's stance subtly shifted, a quiet, protective warning. The bond between Lily and Max was visible to everyone in the courtroom. It was more than comfort. It was a connection forged through shared pain and healing. Max wasn't just helping Lily find her voice. He was giving her the courage to face the man who had hurt her. The prosecutors knew that children often struggle to communicate in court, especially when recounting traumatic events. But Max's presence created a space where Lily could feel safe enough to try. His steady companionship broke through the barriers of fear, allowing her to express truths that words alone couldn't capture. Max also played a unique role during therapy sessions leading up to the trial. In a quiet room filled with toys and soft light, Lily would sit with Dr. Marks while Max lay nearby, providing a silent but constant source of reassurance. It was here that some of Lily's most significant breakthroughs occurred. For example, one day during a session, Dr. Marks showed Lily a photograph of Brenner. The little girl's reaction was immediate and intense. She recoiled, clutching Max's fur tightly, as if drawing strength from him. Max, trained to detect fear, barked softly, a rare occurrence, signaling that something was wrong. This reaction was documented and presented as part of the case, showing how Max's instincts complemented the emotional testimony Lily was prepared to give. Max's presence also helped calm the courtroom itself. When Lily finally took the stand, the atmosphere was thick with tension, but the sight of the gentle giant beside her softened the harshness. Jurors who had never encountered a therapy dog witnessed how Max's calm demeanor helped Lily stay grounded. Even Carl Brenner noticed Max. His usually confident expression faltered when the dog's unwavering gaze met his own, as if Max could see the truth behind the man's polished exterior. Throughout the trial, Max remained vigilant, a silent guardian protecting a small girl whose life depended on the justice system's ability to listen and believe. Max's story did not end with this courtroom. After the trial, he would be officially adopted by Lily's new family, cementing a bond that had changed both their lives forever. The community came to see Max not just as a former police dog, but as a hero in his own right, a four-legged champion who helped bring a frightened child's truth to light, and in doing so, helped protect countless others. In the quiet moments between testimony, Max sat patiently by Lily's side, reminding everyone that sometimes the most powerful voices are spoken without words. The courtroom was packed to capacity, every seat filled with anxious faces, eyes glued to the tiny figure at the center of it all. Lily, clutching Max's leash tightly, was about to speak words that would echo far beyond the courtroom walls. For weeks leading up to this day, the attorneys had prepared everyone for the moment. The defense had done everything to discredit the little girl's testimony, emphasizing her age, her trauma, and the possibility of confusion. But the prosecution stood firm, confident that Lily's truth would come through despite every challenge. The judge, a woman known for her fairness and sharp mind, called the court to order once again. She adjusted her glasses and spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Miss Anderson, you may tell the court what you saw." Lily looked up, her wide eyes meeting the judge's kindly gaze. Max's quiet presence at her side gave her courage. She took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling, as if gathering strength from within. Then, with all the innocence and clarity that only a child could have, she pointed her tiny finger toward Carl Brenner. "That one," she said softly. A hush fell over the courtroom. Her 2 words were simple, yet they carried the weight of years of fear, pain, and silence. The prosecutor nodded gently. "Can you tell us more about what happened?" Lily hesitated. Her gaze flickered to Max and back to the courtroom. The world was big and confusing, but Max's steady presence was a reminder she was not alone. "I was scared," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but it shattered the quiet like glass breaking. Tears welled in the eyes of many in the courtroom. Jurors, spectators, even the judge. They had heard about the abuse, seen the bruises in photos, but hearing the victim speak brought a reality that no evidence could fully capture. The prosecutor encouraged her gently. "What made you scared?" Lily's lips trembled as she searched for words. "He yelled. He hurt me." The defense lawyer immediately stood, trying to object, but the judge held up her hand, signaling calm. The courtroom watched, holding its breath, as Lily continued. "I wanted to hide, but he found me." Max gave a low whimper, as if echoing her pain. Lily's voice grew steadier, fueled by a mixture of fear and determination. "He said I was bad, but Max kept me safe." The prosecutor smiled softly, knowing this was the breakthrough they had hoped for. Questions followed, simple ones, carefully crafted to avoid overwhelming her. "Did you see where he hurt you?" Lily nodded. "Where?" She pointed toward Brenner again. "Here," she whispered, holding her arm as if to show an invisible mark. Medical reports had confirmed bruises and injuries consistent with her description, lending powerful support to her testimony. The defense tried to sow doubt, questioning Lily about inconsistencies, her ability to understand what happened, and even whether Max's presence influenced her statements. But each time, Lily remained steady, her words clear. Witness after witness corroborated her story. Doctors, therapists, foster care workers, creating a web of truth that was hard to unravel. Carl Brenner's expression grew darker with every detail. He sat stiffly, no longer the calm, confident man from the beginning of the trial. Max remained alert, his protective gaze fixed on Brenner as if sensing the danger still present in the room. The judge called for a short recess. As the courtroom emptied, whispers filled the air. Many believed this moment, Lily's courageous testimony, was the turning point. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Reporters pressed microphones toward Marie Donovan, Lily's social worker, hoping for a statement. Marie, with tears in her eyes, spoke softly. "Lily showed incredible bravery today. Her voice is the strongest weapon we have against abuse." In the days that followed, the community rallied even more strongly behind efforts to protect children. Local officials announced plans to review foster care policies and increase funding for support services. Lily's story had become a catalyst for change, a reminder that even the smallest voices can speak truths that demand to be heard. For Lily, the trial was not just about justice. It was about reclaiming her life, about turning fear into strength, and about showing the world that even a 3-year-old can be a powerful witness when given the right support. Max, her silent guardian, remained by her side, a symbol of hope and resilience. Together, They had faced darkness and brought light to a community desperate for healing. The aftermath of Lily's courtroom testimony rippled through the town of Maplewood like a stone tossed into still water. What had once been hushed conversations behind closed doors now spilled into open dialogue. The town that had once turned a blind eye to whispers of abuse was awakening, and the courage of one small girl had become a beacon for change. Local newspapers ran front-page stories highlighting Lily's bravery, Max's role as her protector, and the urgent need to reform the foster care system. Headlines read, "Child's Courage Exposes Dark Foster Home Secrets," and "Justice for Lily Sparks Call for Reform." At the town hall, a packed meeting was called. Families, social workers, law enforcement, and elected officials gathered to confront the uncomfortable truths that had been ignored for too long. Voices once timid with fear now rang loud with determination. Mayor Helen Carter addressed the crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We owe it to our children to ensure their safety. No child should ever suffer in silence." Lily's story reminds us all of the responsibility we share as a community. Advocates for children's rights presented new proposals: increased background checks for foster parents, mandatory regular home visits, and better training for those involved in child welfare. Funding was requested for mental health services aimed at helping traumatized children like Lily. Mary Donovan, Lily's social worker, took the stage next. She spoke about the challenges faced by vulnerable children and the urgent need for support systems that truly protect them. "Lily's voice was the spark," Marie said, "but it's up to us to keep the fire burning. We must listen, believe, and act." The crowd erupted into applause. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, the trial continued. Each day brought new testimony, new evidence, and mounting pressure on the defense. The prosecution's case was solidifying, strengthened by the community's support and the unwavering presence of Max. For Carl Brenner, the walls were closing in. His previously confident demeanor gave way to frustration and anger. His defense attorneys struggled to maintain their strategy as witnesses detailed patterns of neglect and abuse. Yet, Brenner's refusal to admit guilt only further convinced the jury of his culpability. Lily's family, who had stepped forward to adopt her after the trial began, were deeply involved in the process. They had spent months preparing for Lily's arrival, turning their home into a safe haven filled with warmth, toys, and love. Her new parents, Sarah and Michael Anderson, understood the weight of the journey ahead. They had met Max during therapy sessions and welcomed the dog as an essential part of Lily's healing. Michael said in an interview, "We're grateful for the community's support. Lily is strong, but she's still a little girl. With love and patience, we'll help her build a future free from fear." Max, now officially part of the family, was more than a pet. He was a constant guardian and source of comfort. In the weeks following Lily's testimony, support groups formed in Maplewood for foster children and their families. Workshops on trauma-informed care and child advocacy were organized, drawing experts from neighboring towns. Local schools began training teachers to recognize signs of abuse and respond appropriately. Even law enforcement officers underwent refresher courses to improve handling of child abuse cases. The change was palpable. But the journey was far from over. For Lily, the days ahead held both hope and healing, with the support of her new family and Max by her side. For Maplewood, the trial and its aftermath marked a turning point, a collective awakening to the realities faced by its most vulnerable residents. As the jury prepared to deliberate, many in the community waited with bated breath, hoping that justice would be served. Lily's simple words had already done so much. Now, all that remained was the final chapter. The tension in the courtroom was almost tangible as the jury filed back into their seats. Hours earlier, they had begun their deliberations, retreating to a small room to discuss the weighty evidence and testimony they had witnessed. Now, the entire town of Maplewood seemed to hold its breath, waiting for justice to be served. Inside, Lily sat quietly with her new parents, Sarah and Michael, and Max rested faithfully by her side. The little girl's wide eyes flickered nervously around the room, sensing the significance of this moment even if she did not fully understand it. Sarah gently squeezed Lily's hand, whispering comforting words only a mother could offer. The judge called the courtroom to order once more, her expression serious but calm. "Will the jury foreperson please stand and deliver the verdict?" The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a look of solemn responsibility, rose slowly. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. The prosecutor and defense attorney leaned forward, anticipation etched on their faces. "We, the jury," the foreperson began, her voice steady, "find the defendant, Carl Brenner, guilty on all charges of child abuse and neglect." A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom, followed by a wave of murmurs. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others simply nodded, relieved that justice had been served. Carl Brenner remained stoic but visibly shaken, his eyes darting around as the weight of the verdict sank in. His attorneys immediately requested a motion for a new trial, but the judge denied it, emphasizing the strength of the evidence. The judge then scheduled a sentencing hearing, making it clear that the court would ensure Brenner faced the full consequences of his actions. Outside the courthouse, news of the verdict spread quickly. Reporters swarmed Sarah and Michael as they exited with Lily and Max. The couple answered questions with grace and gratitude, thanking the community for its support. "This verdict is a victory not only for Lily," Sarah said, her voice steady but emotional, "but for every child who has suffered in silence. We hope this sends a message that abuse will not be tolerated." Max, sensing the shift in energy, wagged his tail, offering a moment of joy amid the heavy atmosphere. The courtroom trial, however, was just one chapter in a much larger story. In the days that followed, Maplewood's foster care system underwent a thorough review. Officials held emergency meetings to implement new safeguards aimed at preventing future tragedies. Enhanced background checks, more frequent inspections, and better training programs became priorities. Mary Donovan, Lily's social worker, was appointed to lead a task force dedicated to child welfare reform. She spoke candidly about the systemic issues exposed by the case. "For too long, the system has failed children like Lily," Murray said. "Now we have a chance to rebuild trust and create an environment where every child is protected and heard." Lily's story also inspired a local nonprofit organization to expand its services, offering therapy, legal assistance, and emergency housing for abuse victims. Donations poured in from residents who wanted to contribute to lasting change. Meanwhile, Lily continued her healing journey with her new family and Max. Though the scars of her past remained, so did her growing confidence and joy. Her parents watched in awe as she learned to trust again, taking small but steady steps toward a brighter future. They cherished every smile, every word spoken, and every moment of play. Lily's therapist, Dr. Helen Marks, described this phase as crucial. "Healing isn't linear," she explained, "but with love, patience, and support, children like Lily can overcome unimaginable trauma and thrive." Max remained a constant, his gentle presence a reminder that protection and love could come in many forms. The town of Maplewood had been forever changed. What began as a harrowing tale of abuse had transformed into a powerful story of resilience, community action, and hope. Lily's two simple words, "that one," had shattered silence and sparked a movement. As the sun set over Maplewood, a quiet sense of peace settled over the town. It was a peace born not of forgetting, but of facing the truth, standing up for the vulnerable, and believing in the power of one small voice to make a monumental difference. The days that followed the verdict were filled with a mixture of relief and new challenges for Lily and her family. While the weight of justice brought a sense of closure, the true journey was just beginning. The long and delicate process of healing. Sarah and Michael Anderson knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Lily's past trauma had left deep marks, not only on her tiny body, but on her fragile trust in the world around her. For a 3-year-old who had lived through fear and uncertainty, even the simplest things could trigger anxiety. But every morning, Lily awoke in a home filled with warmth and safety, where she was encouraged to express herself freely, at her own pace. Her days began with gentle routines: breakfast with her parents, quiet playtime with Max, and visits with her therapist, Dr. Helen Marks. Dr. Marks had been working with children like Lily for years, guiding families through trauma's tangled aftermath. She emphasized patience and understanding, explaining that healing was not a straight line, but a series of small victories. Every child processes trauma differently, she said during one session with Sarah and Michael. It's important to create an environment where Lily feels safe to explore her feelings without pressure or judgment. Therapy sessions were often a mix of play, storytelling, and gentle conversation. Max was an integral part of this process, his calm presence helping Lily feel grounded. During one session, Lily, sitting on the floor surrounded by toys, hugged Max tightly. For a moment, her tiny face softened in a smile, a rare and precious sight. Outside therapy, Lily's world was gradually expanding. Sarah took her to the park, where she cautiously interacted with other children. At first, Lily watched from a distance, clinging to Max and her mother's hand. But slowly, curiosity won over fear. She tentatively reached out to touch a ball, giggled when it rolled away, and began to explore the joy of simple play. Michael introduced her to books, reading aloud stories about brave animals and kind heroes. Lily's favorite became the tale of a little dog who helped a scared girl find courage, a story that mirrored her own in ways she didn't yet fully understand. The Andersons also made a point of honoring Lily's feelings. When she had nightmares or moments of fear, they never dismissed her emotions. Instead, they offered comfort and reassurance, reinforcing that she was loved and protected. Community support continued to pour in as well. Neighbors dropped off meals, sent cards, and volunteered to babysit, giving Sarah and Michael moments to rest and regroup. Lily's daycare teachers were trained to recognize signs of trauma and respond sensitively, helping her transition smoothly into group settings. Each small success, whether a smile, a new word, or a calm night's sleep, was celebrated as a milestone. As weeks turned into months, Lily's progress became more evident. She began to speak more openly about her feelings, sometimes sharing stories about Max and their adventures. Her laughter grew more frequent, and the shadows of fear that once clouded her eyes began to lift. For Max, the journey was just as profound. No longer just a therapy dog, he had become a beloved family member, a guardian whose instincts and heart had helped save a little girl's life. His tail wagged a little more freely, his eyes shining with the quiet joy of belonging. Sarah and Michael often marveled at the bond between Lily and Max. They understand each other in a way that words can't explain. Michael said one evening as they watched Lily curl up beside Max, drifting peacefully to sleep. But healing was never perfect or painless. There were setbacks, days when Lily would cry without clear reason, when old fears resurfaced unexpectedly. The Andersons learned to weather these storms with grace, knowing that each challenge was part of the process. Through it all, one truth remained clear: Lily was no longer alone. She was surrounded by love, strength, and a community determined to protect her and others like her. Her story was no longer just about pain. It was about hope, resilience, and the power of healing. And as she grew stronger, so too did the promise that Maplewood would never again turn away from its most vulnerable. As the months passed, Lily blossomed in ways no one had dared to imagine during those dark early days. The frightened little girl who had once pointed a trembling finger in a courtroom had grown into a symbol of hope and resilience for an entire community. Her journey was far from over, but the path ahead was brightened by love, healing, and promise. At home, Lily's laughter became a daily soundtrack. She eagerly explored the world around her, no longer shadowed by fear. The Andersons watched with joy as she learned to ride a tricycle, helped bake cookies, and made up songs about Max, the brave dog who had saved her life. Max, ever vigilant, remained a comforting presence. His gentle nuzzles and steady companionship reminded Lily that she was never alone. That protection could come in many forms: some silent, furry, and four-legged. On the anniversary of the trial's verdict, Maplewood held a community celebration in the town square. Banners flew with messages like, "Protect our children," and "Every voice matters." Families, officials, social workers, and neighbors gathered to honor the progress made and renew their commitment to child safety. Sarah and Michael brought Lily, who proudly walked hand in hand with Max through the crowd. The mayor gave a heartfelt speech, praising the collective effort that had transformed pain into purpose. "This town has shown incredible strength," Mayor Helen Carter said. "Lily's courage inspired us all. We vow to continue fighting for every child's right to a safe and happy childhood." Lily's social worker, Marie Donovan, announced new programs funded by community donations aimed at expanding resources for foster children and improving early intervention systems. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily released a handful of balloons into the sky, each one representing a child whose story needed to be heard. Her small face was alight with hope. Back at home, life settled into a new rhythm. The Andersons continued their work as loving parents, knowing there would be challenges but feeling confident in their ability to face them. Lily's therapist, Dr. Helen Marks, remained a trusted guide, helping the family navigate the complexities of trauma and healing. Her advice was simple but powerful: keep listening, keep loving, and never lose hope. The case of Carl Brenner reached its conclusion months later, when he was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. The judge cited the severity of his crimes and the impact on Lily's life, emphasizing society's duty to protect its children. Though the legal battle was over, the ripple effects continued to inspire change beyond Maplewood. Nearby towns adopted similar reforms, inspired by the courage of one little girl and her loyal dog. Lily's story was featured in national media, shining a spotlight on the importance of believing children and the power of community action. For Sarah and Michael, the greatest reward was watching Lily thrive. Her curiosity, laughter, and newfound confidence a testament to the healing power of love and support. One quiet evening, as the family gathered by the fireplace, Lily rested her head on Max's soft fur, her eyes heavy with sleep, but filled with peace. Sarah smiled and whispered, "You're safe now, sweetheart. Always." Lily's small voice replied, "Max keeps me safe." And in that moment, surrounded by warmth and love, it was clear that this was not just an ending. It was a new beginning. A beginning where fear no longer held power, where voices once silenced could speak freely, and where even the smallest heroes could change the world.